their community meeting tonight.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me? You can hear me? Okay. So Julio Arroyo, Director of Maintenance Operations and Safety here with the Mill Valley School District. We're starting our June 10th community meeting for Measure G. And so tonight we'll be discussing our latest update with Measure G.
You turned up the microphone. There you go. Trade with me. It was on and then. Right now.
Julio Arroyo with Maintenance Operations and Safety for the Mill Valley School District. We're going to start our Measure G meeting tonight. And with me tonight, we have Superintendent Kaufman, who I will pass the mic to next. And we also have part of our project team. We have with Lion August, we have Laura Noss and Mark Jewell, who are architects for the Mill Valley Middle School. And as well with AECOM is Century Hitchcock. AECOM serves as the program as well as construction managers for our Measure G program. So tonight, before I hand it off to Carrie, we're going to be going over the overview of before we break for summer of what we've presented to the board last meeting, really focusing around the design of the Mill Valley Middle School, some of the feedback that we received from the department meetings, as well as the different information that we've received this point and where we're at in the design process. A lot of the information comes from our steering committee, which is made up of different administrators as well as staff members, teachers in different departments. And so before I move on to Carrie, I'll have Elizabeth give us an introduction here from the district.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us at this busy time of the school year. I know everybody's plates and schedules are very full. Just want to thank you for coming. And I'm sure most of you have already heard what we are going to say, but there'll be opportunities to ask questions and engage with the panel. I do want to say one of the things we're trying to be very mindful of doing is calling this the Mill Valley School District Facilities Modernization project or process. We're trying to step away from using the term Measure G as our neighbors in adjacent districts are trying to pass very important bond measures. And I think there's some confusion around Measure A, Measure G, and whatever future measures. So as you look at us stepping away from the Measure G nomenclature, you will understand that it's really in an effort to make sure that we're focused on our own district and its modernization.
So thank you. So before I pass it off to Carrie, and she'll talk about Slido and just some of our meeting norms. After Carrie goes over that information, I'm going to pass it off to Lion August to kind of go over our presentation.
Hi, I'm Kiari from Into Action, and we do the community engagement. And as usual, we will be using Slido.com for questions and comments to allow for equity between the online community and the in-person community. So if you have your phone, you can go to Slido.com or scan the QR code to enter your questions and comments in. As usual, we will also use the fabulous norms for the Mill Valley community, Mill Valley School District community. And first and foremost, keep students and learning at the center and speak to each other with kindness and respect and listen with compassion and curiosity and be part of the solution. We like to repeat those every time, even though we know that those are usually always default to the folks in the room and online. So thank you in advance. And we look forward to having an interactive discussion.
Thank you. And I'll pass it off to Laura Noss, who's going to start the presentation and go over the design process and where we're at this point.
Thank you, Julio. We wanted to give an update of where we've been over the past couple of weeks. We were just at the board last week and gave a very similar presentation to what you'll see today, and as well as our third meeting or fifth meeting overall, third of this phase with our steering committee that occurred a week or so ago. So we want to tell you a little bit about what we've heard, the Board of Trustees direction, departmental meetings. We met with each department on site, as well as district administration, give you a brief design update. As many of you know, design is an iterative process, and we are in the early iterations of design. So this is the time to give feedback. We also want to update on the temporary campus that will be part of this project in order to facilitate the building of the new campus, as well as some next steps. So what we've heard, if you go to the next one, Sid, we had at our early conversations many options for this site. Where we were at the last community meeting was three alternatives, two that include two-story classrooms, option 1 and option 2, and the third, which was a one-story option where all buildings were one story. After conversations and a informal vote of the steering committee, as well as conversations with the Board of Trustees, we've landed on option 1, the two-story option, primarily because it provided the greatest amount of open space for students on campus. So this is option 1. The existing multi-purpose gymnasium building remains and is renovated in this option. Two-story classroom buildings occur. Basically, that's 4 floors. 3 of those floors are the same pod configuration, one for 6th grade, one for 7th grade, and one for 8th grade. And the remaining ground floor of one of the buildings will house administrative functions and wellness, as well as the library. And then a separate building for the arts, both performing and fine arts. And on the second floor, as I mentioned, identical pods. It was really important to the steering committee that grade level pods stayed together. So all of their classes short of those arts programs were co-located and had collaborative space. So then we dove in with each of the departments and got their feedback at the level of kind of design from the inside out. So I'm going to put aside the administration right now. We have their meeting upcoming, but we have administration on the left side of the pod, if you will, a wellness center in the center, and then on the right side, this model has the library and media room in it and a cafe. We're looking at some options there, but both of these share a central outdoor space or courtyard. And then this is the pod configuration I mentioned, 5 classrooms around a center collaboration space on each end, and 2 science labs for that grade level in the center, all opening out to this learning patio. Similarly, the other building would have the same on 2 floors. Again, all identical. A future principal can decide which grade level goes where. And this is starting to give some 3D dimension to the classrooms. We use this in order to discuss window locations, casework locations, and connections between classrooms and collaboration spaces with the teachers. And similarly with science, 2 science rooms around a central preparation space, just confirming things like sink locations, teacher prep areas, etc. Then we dove into the arts building, where we'll have 3 fine arts rooms on the north with an outdoor arts area and patio. They'll share some amenities such as kiln spaces and storage spaces, and on the south, band room, drama room, orchestra room, and a chorus room, again with some shared amenities of practice spaces. This center collaboration space will act not only as a gallery for student work, but also for instrument storage. And again, these 3-dimensional views started to facilitate the discussion with the instructors. And then finally, the existing gymnasium currently has some of those performing arts spaces around it. Instead, we would be bringing the PE program in from the portable rooms that it's in and surrounding this building with those classrooms, and looking at creating some larger spaces that could house yoga, dance, or other programs. So we wanted to talk a little bit about design inspiration. It's hard to ignore this beautiful place that you all live when we're looking for inspiration. So we drew on not only Muir Woods, Mount Tam, but Richardson Bay, and how those kind of visuals might manifest themselves in the architecture with sloping roofs and other articulation for outdoor spaces and the building form itself. And the students were really focused on the inclusiveness of the campus. So bringing them some imagery of how we can have student gathering spaces, student muraling, and other things that include them in the process. And again, you can start to see in the architecture how we can use materials and structural forms to mimic some of the iconic images in the area. So again, the site plan then all focuses around a central quad. We're working on that from a landscape design standpoint. Next, please. And you can start to see the landscape architect's early vision for this with the concept of boardwalks and tidal shapes and forms of the more organic shapes. So then when we get to the architecture of the exterior of the building, using some sloped roof forms, hugging, if you will, the view of Mount Tam and the exterior quad, as well as that central space around which each of the classrooms are organized. And you can start to see early white model images of what that might look like with some bridge-like or overlook forms and those spaces that allow some views and vistas for students within the campus. The entry, the idea, kind of a walk through the woods, if you will. We are looking at a security system of single point of entry. So all visitors would come here with a gate that would come across the space and be directed into administration after the gates close first thing in the morning. And then just the early visuals of that pod space and the outdoor learning. It was really important to the teachers, if we went with a two-story scheme, that we also provided outdoor learning on all floors, not just for folks on the ground floor. And this is the ground floor equivalent of that space up above.
Can you hear me? Okay. So this plan is maybe a little bit updated from the last one that you've seen. The intent is still to completely occupy the existing outdoor basketball court area north of Ryan Creek, and then also the parking lot area east of the existing gym, kind of shoehorned in there between the skate park, which currently is going to remain. There's some slight developments here. We've kind of shuffled things around because of the lack of utilities on the north side. So all the science classrooms you'll notice are on the south side of the creek, adjacent to the gym. The brown areas that you see are outdoor deck areas that will eventually have shade structures, outdoor seating for lunch, etc. And at the moment, and you can see the PE portables on the west side of the existing gym, which we've migrated south of the creek so that we could continue to maintain these grade level villages, which were sort of the initial idea. And then I think the intent for, that's okay, you can go forward. And then by consolidating that temporary campus to the east, that'll allow us to build the final project to the west as you see it here. There's some funniness going on there, but for at least a little while, these two will exist together. That's it.
Um, We have this community meeting today. The board has formed a facility subcommittee. We'll be meeting with them on June 17th and July 8th. And then we'll be bringing to the Board of Trustees special meeting in July, the schematic design package and cost estimates for their approval.
Thank you. Thank you. And so now we will open up to questions. Carrie, if you can let us start that
Excellent.
process, please.
So again, if you have the QR code in front of you, some of them are on the seats, or you can go to slido.com and enter in meeting 0610 or just 610. We have one question in the queue so far, so get your questions ready. We have the first question, which is a two-part question. Can you share with us predicted enrollment numbers for the middle school and 5 elementary schools? Do these figures affect how funds are allocated?
I don't have those numbers in front of me right now. The enrollment, give or take, probably 750 here. Elementaries, again, we don't know because we have transitional kindergarten, so we've increased enrollment because of transitional kindergarten. However, we were continuing to decline, so we're about at flat level right now, and funds are allocated generally on a per student basis. If we're talking about discretionary funding, obviously personnel costs and operational costs are more in an aggregate.
Excellent. Okay. The next question, what's the plan for monitoring air quality for students during construction?
Sandrine, do you want to talk about the environmental process and just what that process will be like and things and how we'll address the items like that?
Absolutely. So, as you know, and we've been talking about this over the last 9 months, we have started the California Environmental Quality Act process, which is a required process for public schools. And part of that process is an analysis of the environmental factors, including analysis of the existing site soil and air quality. So as far as the actual measures that will be in place, I don't have the exact answer at this point, but that will be part of the PEA and environmental impact report that will be issued later this summer.
I think the question is also to the extent of during active construction, how are we going to monitor that? And I think that Flint is probably on top of that, but I don't want to answer for them, but I want to make sure that we acknowledge that there are practices and protocols that, as Flint has mentioned many times, they cannot expose their own employees to any sort of risk, and they would not be exposing our children to risk. But I don't know if anyone else has the answers.
So the CEQA process will have likely a mitigation monitoring program that comes out of it for both during construction and ongoing for those areas that need to be mitigated. So we write that all into our specifications for the general contractor, and they will be here as we get closer to construction, not only to explain that mitigation program, but to share the logistical planning for what things will look like during construction.
Okay, our next comment involves photos, which is exciting. And it's, I believe, your photos of flooding. Here we go. Yes. Yes. Hi.
Can I speak?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Hi, Juliette Hart. You all know me. I have photos here. I have pretty pictures too, just like the beautiful plans we saw. I just wanted to show these because there were some questions at the last meeting of where the flooding actually happens. I think there's the perception that it only happens right there. This is flooding that's right there during the high tides and when we had the really wet winters, which we will get again and again. So the flooding that we're going to see is actually surrounding the entire area. As you build hardened infrastructure, you're going to channel that water. So that flooding that we currently see is only going to get deeper. These are photos from the emerging dump materials that is also right there. and out there that would be great to understand what you're doing to mitigate that now and how that's going to be mitigated into the future. Everyone likes to talk about the flooding and the future, but this is actually today, right? This has happened. I repurposed my daughter's science fair poster, and I've got a couple magic eyes. And the little shtick is like, once you see this, you can't unsee it. This is what we live with, and this is what our kids are going to be living with. These are just a couple of examples of sea level rise scenarios for this site and 2 other sites that I picked. I did an analysis of sea level rise, groundwater rise. This site hits every single risk that there possibly is in contrast to every other site except potentially Strawberry. I printed out copies. I thought the board members would be here, but I was wrong. I did an analysis of every single site that you all own so that you can see, once you see this side by side, you will see the site is bonkers to build on. So I just would love to share these photos with you. My daughter, who will be here maybe, because I'm not coming here if you're building on site, has the motto, "Don't dump on our middle schoolers." So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
And thank you, no problem. And apologies to the folks online. They are great photos. And it's wonderful to have them here. And thank you in advance for understanding that if you cannot see them. And I'll go to the response.
I think kind of like taking the questions and the comments just point by point. I think if we can talk about just around the work we're doing around the flood maps around the site and just kind of some of the mitigation measures for the interim campus, and then when we'll have an idea around the main campus in terms of process wise and timeline wise, and then I can talk about the creek and just what we're doing around with the county with that as well. So I think we can get started around the building and the planning and forecasting.
Well, we can start at many of the meetings, some previous meetings, we shared the modeling to date. As we've said, all that comes with the CEQA process for validating the studies that we have. And we will be mandated to build above not only the 100-year floodplain, of course, but to address the long-range planning from the Bay wave studies. So right now, we are intending to put the finished floor of the school above those studies. I will tell you that from the early scenarios that we've seen, this will be one of the highest areas. The school will be you might not have an easy way to get to the school because all the streets will be flooded, but the school will be above that. So that is what our intention is. As I said, we have early preliminary information from other sources and other projects, and the CEQA process will either validate or expand on the data we have, and that will obviously influence how we address the finished floor elevations and the site for this campus.
And then I just want to add just for the comment around the creek. And so the comment around some of the in the creek that's in the middle of the campus that divides the middle school campus as well as the community center, that there's some debris from the previous dump site that was that's shown on there. And so one of the things that we're doing is working with the county. And so as you folks that may be familiar with the school site is, over the last couple of months, we've erected a fence. So the county has requested us to put a fence around there to make sure, and there's an additional signage so we can have a fence between the creek. And so only authorized personnel would be able to enter. Previously, there wasn't a fence. We work with the county every quarter where they come out and they do check the building, check the creek area. And so that's something we're constantly in dialogue. And so this last quarter, that was one of the recommendations and one of the requests that they had for us. And so that's the first thing that they asked us, to put up a fence as well as up signage to make sure that the area was not exposed where anybody could just access it. And then secondly, we're going through the process around mitigation efforts to cover the debris that's in the creek. And so that's its own process. And so currently, we're putting together a work plan that will be submitted to the county, and there's about 3 or 4 other agencies that we're going to be working with to get the work plan approved. And so that is, how do you cover the creek? It could be with rocks, it could be different mitigation measures, and we're working on that, and that's going to be submitted. And then the other process, which may take longer, is being able to access the creek. And so part of that creek, there's different permits that you need to get to be able to access it, to be able to do those mitigation measures. And so that may be a lengthier project to be able to access the be approved for the permit. And so that we're doing both of those items at the same time. First, we're going to put together what our solution is in place, and then we're going to continue on the permitting process, working with the agencies. The county of Marin gave us the feedback. The most important thing for them was having the fence, and we had that up within the 30 days that they asked us to do that in. And so hopefully that answers that question, but that's a process that we're going to be continuing going forward.
Thank you so much. The next question is about timeline again. When will construction begin? And when will the students be moved out of the current building and into the temporary campus?
Sandrine, if you can go over the schedule for the site, please, for the interim and the permanent campus.
Absolutely. So right now we're looking at May of 2025 for start of construction of the interim housing. So essentially our goal is to build the interim housing so student can come back for school year 25-26 to the interim housing, at which point this building would be demolished and construction of a new facility would happen. We're estimating right now end of construction for the new building by the end or Q3 of 2027.
Will they start the school year in the interim housing in
Yes.
August of 2025?
Yes, so the students would be starting the new school year 25-26 in the interim housing and move back in August, September 27 to the new school.
Excellent. One more time. Sorry for the.
Yeah, so I'm just curious because up to this point, all of the timelines have indicated or worked toward interim housing as of January 2025. So now we're saying we're at September of 2025. And I'll go and pull out all of my materials. I've sat in all the meetings.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to, the starting Q1 of 2025 is
You're gonna
started
be building?
construction, like permitting and construction. I don't
Okay.
recall, we really try to minimize the impact on students by doing as much as we can during the summer. So it's always been really the intent to do any construction, obviously not the 2-year construction, but for the modernization projects, for the interim housing, we're really trying to focus that work during the summer so it minimizes the impact on the students and staff.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the security plan? Sorry, can you elaborate on the security plan for the portables? Are there multiple points of entry?
I'll have Laura and the Lionocas team address that question.
Sure. We are intending to create a single point of entry for that as well, with fencing around the perimeter and the administration building at that point of entry, similar to what we discussed with the permanent campus. Obviously, the site is already very what we call porous, where there's a lot of ways to enter the campus. And it is the board's intent with the new campus and the interim housing that we start to create a perimeter that they can secure, understanding that they're going to go across the creek for PE and other things, but that will be in kind of a supervised way and folks can't be entering the campus. And doing that in a way that's both secure, but also welcoming to the students and staff who are working here.
This is just a little follow-up on that from Chris, and thank you. So it's just specifically where is the temporary housing proposed and how are we keeping kids safe? And it's just additional piece of.
Sid, would you mind bringing that interim housing slide back? A little, yeah. Yeah, and that one's good. Go ahead.
Might be easier just to put the field in here or asking the questions. So there will be a fence line that separates the field and the rec center from the interim campus. There will also be a fence line that separates the construction zone from the interim campus. And then I think what Laura was describing was the main controlled access point is adjacent to the admin. There'll be a gate access here, open in the mornings and for drop off and pick up in the afternoon. Everything else is going to be gated. This graphic doesn't really show all the fence lines, but that's the intent, that we're going to treat it very similar to the way we're trying to treat the final project.
Okay. So the question for the folks at home is we need a tour of the image. And unfortunately, you at home cannot see the fabulous Mark Jewell pointing to images and more. But we can hear your voice, and hopefully that'll be illustrative of the
So-
the tour.
Maybe starting with the existing gym, which we know is already here. To the south of that, there's a row of existing portables that are currently.
Sorry, one more time. We're going to turn this and hopefully it'll be easier to see for the folks at
seats up here too.
in the room.
Yeah.
Are we good? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. So again, starting with the gym, which we know is existing. South of the gym, there's a row of existing portables. Those are going to remain in place. North of the gym, there's a series of portables. The Panther Cafe is there, a couple art rooms, the music room. Those are going to remain as is for the interim temporary campus. The PE portables that are currently north of the creek are going to migrate over here. This graphic is at least a week old now, and all 4 of them are actually going to come to this side in this general area. And then everything you see in blue along the north side of the creek is all new classrooms. The brown is outdoor deck areas that'll have seating, shade structures, planting in containers that will eventually move to the final project. To the east of the existing gym, same thing. This is entirely new. The colors are a little different because we want to differentiate the library space, which is about 2,000 square feet, the admin, same thing, and then all of the science classrooms. And you'll notice that there's some kind of peach colored spaces adjacent to some of the portables, and those are the restroom modules, so that we've got enough restrooms distributed. Does that help?
Map of where? One more
Current,
time.
sorry. Do you have a map that, overlays the temporary housing where the construction is happening and how close our students will be to the construction site with,
I think it's the next slide, but it's
and
it's
so
still in
how,
development.
yeah, okay, and the waste treatment
Go
plant?
to the next. So these are kind of currently in real time migrating up this way. There's probably going to be a couple of them over here. There's going to be a fence line that kind of jogs along in here. It's not shown on this graphic, to separate the construction zone from the interim campus. There's not a lot of distance, but there. I couldn't do
feet.
that. I couldn't do that at this point. I mean, it's just very early.
What type of fence?
It's a good question.
Usually it's a blanketed chain link fence of a certain height. Sorry.
Usually it's a
chain link
blanketed
fence.
chain link fence of a certain height.
The next round of graphics will have a fence line, so we can have that conversation a little bit better.
Great interactive discussion. All right. Now, next question is, how will we ensure students don't suffer academically? Ooh, it just disappeared. How will we ensure students don't suffer academically and socially during this construction due to being placed in temporary buildings?
I think part of the reason that we're building the temporary housing and trying to keep our students together in a 6 through 8 setting is to preserve the integrity of the middle school experience. We have our staff prepared to move their classrooms and be ready to go, and are working with our bargaining unit to make sure that they have the time they need to set up classrooms in the temporary housing. And again, as you heard, the sequence is intended to have them start in a new campus, start a brand new year in a new temporary campus where there are opportunities for them to come together, and the same facilities or similar facilities as we currently have here, so that they're able to pursue their education over the course of the 25-26 and 26-27 school year, where they would return to the completed campus in the fall of 27. So their experience would be fairly coherent and consistent, all on a contiguous campus.
Thank you so much. The next question has to do with hazardous materials again. What is the plan to deal with the current resurfacing of dump materials?
I think at this point. Sorry, at this point, and it's best we just talk about the timeline and we're kind of how we're going to get to the point to make those determinations. If you can talk about that, Sandrine, please.
Sure. I'm not sure if the question was related to the creek itself or the actual site, but I'll address the site. So again, we're in the process of doing an environmental evaluation. As you know, this was a dump and burn site. Over the last few decades, there has been measure in place, like Julio was mentioning, on a quarterly basis. There are inspections. Our environmental engineer has reviewed all the data that is available. The primary measure that has been in place since the very beginning for this site is essentially a soil cap, right? That encapsulates what is below us. So the plan right now, and the environmental engineer has submitted what is called a work plan to the Department of Toxic Substances Control. I believe it was in May. We should hear back from them this month. And the next step will be to actually do some testing to verify what is the actual condition on site. And we're going to do that during the summer when nobody is on site. So essentially just taking samples throughout the site. So we have a good representation of the existing condition. And based on the data, based on the analysis of those data, they're going to put in place recommendations on for construction, essentially how to handle making holes if they need to make holes, monitoring the air, encapsulating what they need to encapsulate. It could be a lot of different remedies, but that's the plan. Essentially, by the end of the summer, we should know exactly what is there and how it is recommended to being handled both during construction, but also in the design.
And just a
Yes.
Those
They are-
findings will be
They
made.
are actually going to be part of the CEQA report I was talking about earlier. That is one portion of it. It's actually a big portion, and that's why we made it a focused environmental impact report because of this. All this will be online. There will be during the summer, we are about to issue what's called a notice of preparation, essentially telling the public that we are going to issue a draft environmental report for public review. And that's going to happen during the summer. And there's, I think it's 45 days for the public to be able to review, provide comments. And there's another round of that report that has also public comment period. So it will absolutely be available to everybody.
oh,
Is there any scenario planning based upon different scenarios that might play out?
Question was about scenario planning for the people in online.
Could you define what you mean by alternatives? Well, at this point, I don't think there is like, you know, they didn't come up with 10 plans, but they're really waiting to see those, the testing, what comes out of those borings. But based on the information that was available, and I believe, when did they come to talk to the board? In January, I believe, they presented their findings and they didn't find anything unusual that could not be mitigated. So, yeah, you're welcome to look at the findings. I think it was the January board meeting, but yeah, really waiting to see what is actually there to make recommendations.
And I just want to add in terms of the creek, and I'll just let Carrie just talk after that, just raise the next question, but because I think initially it may have talked, the question was around just what we're going to do around the creek. And so just going back to my earlier point, so we are putting together, like Sandrina's saying, a similar process and putting together a work plan. And that work plan is going to say, this is how we're going to mitigate the creek. It could be putting large boulders over the creek to be able to cover the debris in there right now, or different. That's going to be submitted here to the county by the end of the month. But that necessarily won't go forward until we get a permit to access a creek. So it's kind of almost, we have to put forward a work plan, but there's multiple agencies that we'll work with to be able to go, each have their own permitting process. And so we'll go through that process to be able to go inside the creek, make an analysis, put together the full scope of work of what we need to do. And so while we will put forward a work plan, the permits of each agency may take a little bit longer, but ultimately that's why it was important for the county that we had a fence. And that was first and foremost the biggest priority that they put forward to us. And so we will be moving forward on that process, is that will each take each agency's process and it could take a while, depending on each agency, their review. And then I'll have Carrie go over the next question.
I just wanted to thank everybody for doing their best to use Slido. We are trying to have equity, especially because we started at 4, between the people who couldn't make it in person and the people that are in the room. And I want to thank everyone for trying to support that. I'm at the comment from 4:18 p.m. right now. And so we're trying to also get them in chronological order so everyone feels heard. So thank you so much for that. And are you done with the comments for that particular one? The
Yes,
next one goes back to flooding, which is, what are the plans to mitigate the frequent flooding in the parking lot area during the construction period?
I could take a whack at that. Yeah. So at least for the interim temporary campus, currently we're considering a modest increase of grades along the skate park, essentially like a half or a third of the eastern portion of that parking lot, as well as the basketball courts on the opposite side of the creek. That end of the site is probably going to be raised about 18 inches or so in the interim. I can't speculate if we're going to go beyond that for the final, but at least for the temporary campus, that's for those 2 years, that's the short-term solution to that area. Just for, I mean, we can talk a little bit about numbers. The skate park is around elevation 7.5. The gym that's here now is about 13.9. The edge of the parking lot is at about 10. And currently the base flood elevation, as FEMA defines it, is at 10. And for DSA or any kind of development that we want to do to comply with code, we have to be at an elevation of 11. Currently, we're contemplating everything being between 13 and 15 for the permanent project. So just order of magnitude. I know we don't have any graphs or anything to show that, but at least in the interim, we will be raising grades a little bit to do the temporary campus.
So I'm going to ask these next foundational questions together. I know you've answered them multiple times, but it's helpful, I think, for some just coming into this process to hear it again. And I'm going to ask them together because I know they're linked. The first one is, has the district considered an alternative temporary learning solution given the construction noise, environmental concerns, and flooding? And is there any scenario in which the CEQA process or other environmental discovery could cause the board to pause and reevaluate this site as the location? So it's going back to all of the things that we've discussed, but I think it's important to say that again for this, for anonymous, 4:20 p.m.
So as far as alternate sites, we did look, I think we started over the summer last year and presented those options over the fall into early this year. We did look at alternate sites, whether they are existing school properties or not. Based on the findings, the pros and cons for each, the board approved remaining on this site for the project. And then we did look within this property at different options and locations. And the board approved in March rebuilding on the existing footprint. So yes, we have explored other options. And actually going back to the CEQA report that will be outlined in there, part of the CEQA report requires that we looked at alternate sites. So, and that will be one of them. And also the modernization of this building is another one. And there will be mentions of all the other ones we've looked into.
And is there anything that could come up that would cause us to pause or the board to pause? and
Yes,
look at it?
as always, like we don't have 100% of the information. So until we actually do the exploration, the borings, the testing, yes, there could be something and we might have, there's a risk, right, in each process.
Because it already said that there was enough data.
One more
that-
time. If you said there could be something.
You say that there could be something with these borings that you're going to potentially do in the summer. Well, the community center has had plenty of borings. We know that there's 6,500 parts per million of lead. We know that there's toxic chemicals. I'm concerned that I don't really understand why we're doing, if DTSC has already said, you can skip number 1, which I believe is what happened. I could be wrong. They said, because they already have enough data. Is that correct?
Actually, step 1 was skipped because typically step 1 of the process is about asking the question, is there something we should look into at this site? Is there something of significance? And we already knew there was because it was a dump.
Yeah.
And it's been monitored. There is documentation. So that's why we didn't go through step 1 because it was automatically answered. Yes, there is something. Let's look into it even more and get the data that is adequate for us to do this work. So that's the reason step 1 was skipped.
Okay, thank you.
I can add to that though also. I mean, I think the most recent geotech information that we have for this site is from like 2010. Okay, there were only like 3 borings or there was very limited investigation material. And in order to do the project that we want to do, we need a lot more information throughout the site. And instead of trying to extrapolate from like 3 points across 10 acres.
Okay, next up is from 425. What is the plan for the noise of active building during learning hours?
So we'll definitely invite our construction team when in future months, but typically our contractor would come up with a plan, right, on what makes the most sense and work with staff and students being on site. Typically, they are able to do the most noisy activity outside of school hours. Sometimes they can't, but I think there is a plan that as a team, we would meet with the community and the district and figure out what that plan should look like so that we minimize the impact, again, on students and staff. But again, if you I'm thinking the next few meetings, community meetings, we might be able to address that in more details. We're really looking at strategy right now on site on how to sequence things.
And just to add to some previous comments, I think Laura maybe mentioned it a couple board meetings ago of fencing with matting on it that does help minimize some of the noises that does come from the construction site. So those are just some of the elements that will be added into the plan that we'll put together as we get closer to construction.
But it won't be silent.
Won't be silent. Okay.
So it sounds like the noise mitigation. It sounds like noise mitigation will be primarily handled then by sequencing of the timing of the noise and some fencing. Will there also be the windows on the portables are like rated to be a higher noise protective or insulation or something in the buildings themselves?
So the portable buildings will all meet current code, and current code has higher levels of insulation than even this building, dual pane windows, for example, and things like that. Specifically, construction noise mitigation, they're not necessarily designed for, but if they will be air conditioned. Again, some of the portables that have not been, so teachers always have their doors open. And so they'll be able to keep their doors closed during times of noise, which will help with the sound mitigation to some degree. We also chose the site to the east of the multipurpose because the multipurpose has the potential to be a pretty significant buffer to that noise.
Interesting. Okay, is the public comment for the EIR on the calendar yet? And if so, when is that? Are portables being constructed prior to that period? Thanks.
So right now we are planning on having what I mentioned earlier, a notice of preparation has to be issued, which we intend to issue at the end of this week. This needs to be issued at least 30 days before we issue the environmental impact report draft. And in between, this notice is essentially saying, public, this is what we intend to have. Here are all the topics we're going to address in the report. If you have any comments about this list of topics, please provide your comments. We are also, and this is not mandatory, this is not by statute, we are organizing a community meeting specifically related to the notice of preparation and the EIR on July 18th. I believe that's also the board meeting that evening. So right before the board meeting, we will have a community meeting to encourage people to provide comments related to the notice of preparation and EIR. So, and I think the second question was about portables being built. As far as I know, they are not being built at this point. We're still looking into the planning part of those.
Thank you so much. From 427, thank you for holding out 427 and more. How will students eating outdoors at the temporary area be protected from gases, particularly gases and particulates released from soil from construction? Workers can wear masks, ... What about kids?
I think again, that's going back to the mitigation plan, right? That is we'll have more information by the end of the summer. A mitigation plan will be put in place in partnership with also the district and the construction team. I mean, one of the simple things that we see on construction site is usually keeping the soil wet at all times, right? To minimize the impact or the amount of dust in the air. That's one form of mitigation. That's we would expect in some situation also air monitoring by devices and any like alarms sounding if some levels of particles would be too high. So there will be some mitigation measures in place. I don't know which one at this point, but that will be outlined in that report.
Is there an understanding of enrollment drop off if this current plan goes through?
Not currently.
1 sec. No.
This was our second question about enrollment numbers in the district. I feel like it seems a little disingenuous to say you don't know what the enrollment's going to be like when certainly students who are going to matriculate here, who you expected to matriculate, have many of them given notice that they're not going to. So can you talk about what you expect to have happen if the middle school enrollment drops in response to some of these concerns?
The question was specifically, was I aware of what the drop was? I am not specifically aware of the drop, nor have I been informed of a specific set of numbers of drops. We are in declining enrollment. We know that's the case. And I think for us, we're currently running some very small classes at cost to the district. And I think we would probably continue to have to do that if enrollment drops significantly. So I think as with any type of declining enrollment, we'd adjust our staffing and our programming accordingly. However, again, in the current situation, we have a middle school that was originally 1,100 kids and it's now about 720. So we would continue to run the same type of programming that we've been running without a huge impact in terms of the quality of instruction, the quality of instructors, or the offerings to students. And I'm struggling with the going back and forth. So this is something I really don't want us to do. It doesn't, so I'm happy to hand the mic over, or if you could hand the mic back. I just don't want to answer call and response
Okay.
right now.
I understand there might be a historical declining enrollment. I'm asking specifically about next year, or do you have like any scenarios for what happens if there is a precipitous drop in enrollment below 720? I'm not that concerned about whether the facilities can handle the students that are currently here, but more about in terms of how funding's allocated and how the middle school experience for these students who are coming into the middle school would be affected if we see families choosing not to join the interim campus in the next few years.
Okay. Well, first of all, again, I have no information that there are going to be precipitous drops. Like that is not the information I have currently. And without going into great detail, there are many prohibitions for us as a school district to adjusting staffing spontaneously. So there would be a very clear process if we needed to adjust staffing to reduce based on students not enrolling. Again, I don't anticipate a world where we wouldn't be offering the same program we offer now or programming we offer now. It potentially might be one less teacher per grade level, but again, that would have to be board action and a layoff process that really doesn't make any sense if we're going to bringing back a campus in 2 years. So I think there are a lot of mitigating circumstances that we just don't know about. And again, I don't have information that there's a precipitous drop off at this point.
And out of respect for all the people in the queue, we're going to just focus on Slido and then open it back up if we get through these, and out of respect for people's time. So back to 4:25, p.m. When is the DTSC 30-day public comment period?
So there's actually 2 periods. One is going to be during the summer. I believe the date for comments, I think comments are due until July 19th, which would be after the public meeting. And then we would be submitting to DTSC right after that. So at the end of July, so essentially August, September would be when the document is open for review by the public and all agencies. So that would be the first period. After that, it all depends on how many comments and how long it takes to respond to draft the final document. But there would be another period, most likely October, November of this year. And it's typically about a 45-day period.
Someone wanted to know where to look for that.
So the document will be available. We are intending to most likely post it on the district website, but it can also be looked at on the DTSC website. and all the agencies that would be informed. We can provide a list of where it is available and the link so everybody can look at it.
So this goes back to the schematic. The schematic shows the classrooms literally on top of each other, fenced in. What is the school district doing to alleviate the stress on the student? It just says the schematics. I'm assuming it means what was shown just now. The schematic shows the classrooms literally on top of each other, fenced in. What is the school district doing to alleviate the stress on the student?
Right,
It's anonymous.
I assume that there's certain parameters around housing students in proximity to each other, so maybe that's the answer. I know.
Mhm.
So assuming we mean the temporary campus, we have shown some areas of gathering between the grade level pods so that students can be outside and gathering. Obviously, there's the Friends Field, which the school currently uses for outdoor gathering space. And then when we talk about fenced locations, we still have to meet minimum exiting requirements. So those fences will all have exit hardware on them, so students aren't locked in. They have a perimeter fence for them to, keep passersby from coming into the space. I hope that's what.
Acreage different? I guess that's what, like. I'm assuming. My assumption is the question is like, okay, you're going down from 13 acres to what? And what's the average per student square footage that is needed for a less stressful campus? I'm not stipulating that I
good
think that
question.
it's as stressful because I'm not sure I agree with that, but that's, I think where it's coming.
that the outlet we have here is the Friends Field and the outdoor play space there. Obviously, there are guidelines from the Department of Education about school site size, and we did a lot of that analysis when we looked at the alternative sites. I will tell you that this temporary campus without Friends Field certainly wouldn't meet those minimum requirements in the near term. But I will also tell you that your neighbors in San Francisco Unified and LA Unified live on much less space than even our temporary campus. So the Department of Education has outlets for that kind of thing. And what it really, the only trigger is that the district has to provide how they are delivering physical education services on a smaller site. And obviously with Friends Field and the existing gym both still being available to the same population, that mitigation will be fairly simple.
So this next question actually mentions Friends Field and brings us back a little bit to the foundational or the evolution. So how far along is the district in the permitting process? Given the known challenges with the site, why not further consider alternatives such as Friends Field?
How far are we on?
Well, right now, as far as the design for the middle school, we are in what we call the schematic design phase. So for the last 6 months, 9 months, we've been working on the concept phase, which included looking at other alternatives, including Friends Field. Again, the board elected to stay on this site and rebuild on the same location as the existing main building. So right now we're almost completing schematic design. Laura mentioned that July 18th will be when we will be presenting schematic design to the board of trustees. And then we're looking at least until the end of the year to get a set of documents into the state architect for review. So we're a little far away from submitting for permits if we're looking at just building permits.
So these next two questions I'm going to bundle because they go back to the flooding and they're related. Current flooding comes from the storm drain system. Elevating the road won't solve that. What is the plan to deal with the flooding from the storm drain system? And why would you build here if you think the surrounding area would be flooded and we couldn't access the school?
I think the comment around the streets leading into the school being flooded was more of a comment that I think it's a regional city and Mill Valley issue that we're all gonna grapple with, that it won't just be this parcel that will be needing to think about mitigation efforts around flooding. It will be a Mill Valley wide. So it was more of that comment talking about that we will, as part of our project, we have to come up with the solution for this parcel, but this will be a system-wide issue throughout the city that many neighborhoods will have that similar mitigation that will need to take place around just the future flooding and what we're projecting around the maps from FEMA and different analysis that's been done. But and secondly, and just I think just going back to just our process of what the standard we have to build on and just the FEMA flood maps and so forth, if we can just touch base about that.
Yeah, I can hit that again. So for the interim temporary campus, the intent is to leave the drop-off as it is now. And Sycamore, obviously, we're not proposing any improvements to Sycamore either. For the permanent project, once those portables are gone, the intent is to raise that drop-off up onto the site much higher than it is now. So it's a little closer to the gym elevation. However, like Julio said, Sycamore, there are currently no plans to do anything to Sycamore itself. There have been some conversations about additional pump options and mechanical means to potentially alleviate some of the flooding in Sycamore. But I think our hope would be that this is an opportunity for a partnership to be formed with the city to do something about Sycamore directly, because we can't just raise that or do something to Sycamore without affecting the wastewater treatment facility, the access to the wastewater treatment, access to the parks. It's really a bigger issue. So we're doing what we can on our site for the permanent project. And
Okay, if exposed trash from the old dump is already an issue in the creek beds as water levels rise, how will we protect kids as it continually encroaches on the campus?
I think that's going to be part of the work that I talked about previously, is that we're going to be working towards mitigation efforts around the creek. Part of it is a process piece where we have to get the permits required to be able to do that. And so we're going to submit a work plan. We'll submit that to the county, as well as there's a couple agencies from the state, the Water Resource Board, Cal Recycle, that will have its own process for us to enter that creek, do some due diligence around our plan and get the information that's needed, as well then resubmit it again and then start that. So that process is ongoing. And so we should be submitting our work plan by the end of this month, continue down the permit process, and we're going to make sure that we're just continue down the process and make sure that we work towards those mitigation efforts.
When will we get updated cost bids on the project to make sure we can afford it before kids are moved to temporary housing during the summer of 2025?
Andreen, if you can talk.
Right, the intent is, I mentioned the July 18th board meeting, where we will be presenting the schematic design along with the cost estimate. So it is really our intent at the board meetings where we do ask for approvals to keep moving forward, that we not only just present design, but we have the cost data associated with this. So July 18th will be the next time we present an updated cost estimate.
Great. Has any preliminary testing prior to the EIR been done on the site water and soils, given the dump and water treatment impacts?
So the prior testings were done a few years ago, and I know there is the quarterly monitoring. So we as how do we call it? Not Measure G anymore. The middle school project, the district project, we are essentially taking that data and updating it and augmenting it so that it is current data. So as part of Measure G project, we have not yet done testing, but we have data we're basing our work plan on, and we'll be doing the testing based on.
And that will be most likely just like what we currently have in place with the school site. We have methane meters in our portables exterior. We have quarterly inspections with the county that we do jointly. And so those are the ongoing efforts of our mitigation measures. And so I imagine that would continue into the new campus.
Okay, anonymous 4:31 p.m. The new campus looks fab. Thank you. What else could we do to make the temporary campus more uniquely beneficial for students unlucky enough to have to spend their years there?
I think we can just talk about just some of the designs, I think, around keeping the students together in grades, the middle school experience, and different aspects that we've been, and I'm sure there'll be some iterations as we talk to admin as well.
Yeah, we explored all sorts of alternatives. One was keeping students at various grade levels on existing campuses, moving them to other campuses together. And ultimately, the board felt that this location where students stayed together in the 6th, 7th, and 8th configuration was the right one. So then from there, we had to look at what was the best way to address those goals on the existing campus. And so Mark alluded to grade level configuration or pods. Now, trying to keep those grade levels together, trying to create that single point of entry, providing access to Friends Field and also to the gymnasium. All of those things are part of what we're trying to do here. I will tell you they are portables, and there's 12 of the 12 portables here now that students are in. These will be there for 2 years and gone. And so, you know, while it's not a new school condition, they will be new portables. They will be air conditioned. They will meet current code. And so I think in some ways it's probably a better environment than the 12 or 15 folks that are in aging portables out there now, and shade structures and other things that try and create that sense of community, understanding that it is a temporary solution.
Will the kids be able to use the community center field for play or PE?
The plan is to remain the same as for the community, Friends Field is to be used in the same way it's used now for PE and physical education.
And if the decision for portables, the portables location is not official, can we create a process for another location option?
The board made it this, so just to go back on what Sandrine was saying earlier, we spent last summer going into the fall and then winter making basing off the California Department of Education and the different factors that we would need to look at to relocate the middle school. The board made a decision based off our current campuses and then directly comparing Edna McGuire to the middle school current campus. And the board made a decision to stick to this site. And so that's where we've been progressing towards.
The MVMS library is known as a safe space for kids with learning differences and social anxiety. How will you replace this type of safe space with portables?
We've been having discussions at the department level, as also with administrators around. I think it's been referred to as the main meeting spot of the campus, or other terms have been used. And so we are going to have a library. It won't be the same concept in the interim campus. We're trying to, and we've taken that feedback for the permanent campus, and that's what some of the information that Laura was sharing earlier that came from our steering committee. So it's something that's important to staff, and they've communicated that to us. And so for the interim, we're doing the best we can to make that in a focal spot, as well as for the permanent.
And the addition of some wellness space was a big part of our last steering committee conversation.
Great, thank you. Can you share the current air quality reporting for this location next to a wastewater treatment plant? Perhaps that's online sharing.
In terms of air quality, Sandra, can you talk about just at this point,
There is currently no report that we've done. However, as soon as we have the findings based on the testing of the air and soil, which should be by late summer, that will be made public. So yes, you will be able to see that.
yeah, the gases are monitored regularly. We have that's part of the mitigation efforts. We work with the county where they come in quarterly. We have methane sensors here in the exterior of the campus, as well as part of the historical information when there was more issues in terms of the odors coming from the wastewater treatment plant. That was performed at that time in terms of understanding what the air quality was at that time. That's going back a couple of years when it was at a heightened level, but that's also data that historically we've shared with our consultants as well.
This is sort of linked. It is my understanding that this site is already and currently in violation of methane levels. Is this true?
No, we have not received any violation for methane levels. What I think that comment may go back to is that the information that I was providing around building a fence as well as signage and then working towards mitigation measures for the creek, that formally came through a violation, and that was every quarter we get inspected by the county. And so they came when this last go around in our previous inspection, that's when that came forward. And so they requested that we put down the creek. And so formally it comes from a violation, but it's something that we've been meeting with the county regularly. And so when we asked about why it wouldn't come in another form, they said, well, it provides the agency, it would be us for funding to be able to for the mitigation measures. So that's why they formally put it forward as a violation. And so those were the different that was a reasoning that they used for it. But it's something that we've been continually monitoring with the county.
It wasn't connected to methane.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for 38 p.m. How might parents or small businesses help make the temporary campus as special as possible? Question mark. Can we work together on needed assets like furniture, design elements, etc.? What's needed? Question mark.
Well, I wish one of the things we should probably do is surface our temporary housing video again, because I think people will see things that are already planned in terms of hardscape, opportunities for students to have gathering spaces and covered spots. So I think once we have that final design done, then we of course will welcome any contributions and support, but we need to get the initial design done and planned.
That video was cool, by the way. For the DTSC sampling, will you sample below the cap?
Yes, I believe we're going all the way 15 feet or deeper in some areas.
Excellent. And what if the testing does not come back with safe results? What is plan B?
I was just going to mention before I pass it to Dr. Kaufman is part of our planning going into that is setting aside mitigation measures, mitigation funding for the environmental process. And this question more refers to if it's something that can't be mitigated. I mean, but first and foremost, we do have money set aside around making sure that we have the money for mitigation measures. Part of going into this process, like we talked about earlier, is based off the information we had, the soil reports from 2018, based off the FEMA flood maps, based off the data that we had at this point, looking over the community center soil reports that we had from some years ago. So those were all the data, the information that informed our decision. But we also have money set aside for that. So that's, I think, we're gonna deal with things as they come up, but we've been making informed decisions to get to this point.
Great. What entity is preparing the EIR per CEQA, the soil testing and other monitoring?
So we have a CEQA consultant. He's essentially specialized in in preparing CEQA documents. He's done quite a few over his lifetime. Actually, recently, he's done the one for the high school district. So he's the lead essentially preparing this report, but there are several sub-consultants under him that are preparing very specialized sections. Like there is an archaeologist looking at Edna and the middle school site. There's a traffic consultant. There's a noise consultant. There's a lot of very specialized people that are part of this, essentially putting the data together and recommendations for this report.
Ooh, piggyback off of this about endangered species, maybe there's an endangered species consultant. Any preliminary work on potential impact of endangered/threatened species, ? Are there specific dates for public comment and draft EIR and final ?
All right, so yes, part of the list of sub-consultants that are part of gathering the data for the EIR is a biologist. So we also have we will have a biology section as part of that report. I don't know at this point if there is or not any endangered species, but we'll know soon. The question was about the dates again. So we are issuing the notice of preparation on Friday. We are organizing a community meeting on July 18th to receive any additional comments. July 19th is the deadline to submit any comments. After that, we will be submitting the EIR draft EIR for public review. That will be a 45-day period, and then there will be another cycle after that.
So just a quick thank you to everyone with their patience online and in the room and their amazing, diverse and informed questions, and to our panel for bringing us back and back. Here's another one, last one past and present, obviously. What were the specific concerns with the Edna site option?
There were multiple concerns that the board expressed. One is it was the only of the elementaries that even came close to meeting those guidelines I mentioned related to site size. So it became the alternative that did move forward into the EIR for that reason. The second concern that the board, but still was impactful. The second concern of the board was decentralizing or upsetting the Edna students by having to move them and place them on other elementary school sites to make way for the middle school being done at that site. The third was really the environmental issues that came up during the Edna project, including traffic because of its kind of dead end configuration. But as importantly, there were significant archaeological resources unearthed during that were significant in their mitigation. And the expansion we would need for the middle school would likely find similar archaeological concerns. So it had its own environmental mitigations that had to be done. So at the end of the day, I think the desire to not disrupt the Edna community, and then what it would take to move students throughout the campus was certainly one of the big issues.
It was also the longest and most costly option for us, so we would have had opportunity costs that would have impacted our overall scope of work.
Okay, this goes back to the backup plan. What is your backup plan when the state architect DTSC deem that is not safe to allow children to be on site during construction?
I think, again, to the point of the existing campus, we already have the school campus that's built on this. It was approved at the time, which was much less conservative. It's conservative now. We have an adjacent community facility that we understand has had a number of elements mitigated and addressed successfully. We have pre-existing reports that have been studied in depth. So we don't anticipate that there is anything that we could not mitigate. If we arrive at a place where we cannot mitigate, we would have to consider not building. We would have to consider buying other property, which we can't afford. We would have to consider, potentially revisiting some other things. But again, at that point, we start to get to a place where the cost escalation precludes a scope of work that gets us the middle school that we would want. So it would take much greater deliberation and scope planning on our part, and very likely be less of a middle school remodel, quite frankly.
Thank you. What are the access points for construction versus students? Since it looks like everyone is using the same current driveway.
I think that's a topic for a future community meeting. We will come back, as I mentioned, with the logistics plan with the general contractors to address everything from their site traffic to student safety and the other noise mitigation issues. We're just not there yet.
And this also goes back to the decision for the location of the portables. And the question is, shouldn't it follow that decision for the portables location, follow the completed CEQA analysis?
Can you please repeat the last part?
Shouldn't the decision for the portables and location follow the completed CEQA analysis?
So part of the CEQA report is based on an assumption. And the report has to base findings and mitigations and recommendation based on a base design on the site. Essentially, we can't just write a report for an imaginary site that we would like, right? We need to say, okay, we think we want to look at this site because it makes the most sense for us. Here are the actual findings. Here are the environmental findings from the boring, from the air quality, from the archaeologist. Like, we need actual data to put in this report so that there is substantial information that allows us to make recommendations and remediation measures. If we don't pick a site or a school, we don't have anything to base that analysis on. So that's why it is standard practice to pick a site, do design, and submit it as part of the report so that it is the base or the basis for the analysis of that choice.
Quick question about the location, because I think the question was about the location of the temporary housing, and I was thinking that was partly because we already have a hardscape there.
Yes, but also just to remind everybody, also the interim housing is considered part of the project. The state will look at the interim housing not as a temporary campus. It is being designed and built as if it would stay forever. So it meets the exact same standards as permanent construction. So it is considered as part of the project for CEQA.
And we won't build anything until those results are here. And as Sandrine said, the basis of design is the design you saw today that allows them to analyze it. If there is something that comes out of CEQA that can't be mitigated either for the temporary campus or the permanent campus, we will have to respond to that. We don't know what that is yet. We're doing this work in parallel, both to inform CEQA, but also to keep the schedule moving forward so that we don't take an additional year or two of escalation on the costs.
So this is sort of piggybacking on that, but back to the Friends Field, because the previous question it's highlighting that the previous question regarding Friends Field, that consideration was for the portables, not the permanent school. Can't the temporary campus be considered for that spot?
Long story short, no. There are a number of issues that would need to be addressed. I'm not an architect, but the utilities pull is one of them. There are costs that get added. There are title questions. There are a number of legal factors that impact our ability to determine what to do on those fields at this point.
Got it. And is there any plan to pull incoming families on if this current project plan will make them leave the district? I know many families, including mine, that are.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear it. To pull them?
To pull incoming families on if this current project plan will make them leave the district.
P-O-L-L. Okay.
P-O-L-L,
I was
sorry.
trying to think like pull.
There you
I think that we certainly could. I don't think we're going to not implement a $194 million bond measure on individuals who may be leaving for, 1 or 2 years as we build our campus. I think our focus is really on the quality of instruction and program for kids. And I personally will stand by the quality of instruction and programs for kids, whether it's in a portable, whether it's in a solid building like this, or whether it is in our new construction. I think that is our focus and our reason for being as a district. And that is something I, as superintendent, will make sure happens for children.
Absolutely. And this is related to that last comment specifically. The kids significantly affected by this construction are the children that teachers say are really showing the impact, the disruption academically and socially that COVID time caused. Is there a plan to implement additional support for these kids who have to endure more disruption?
I think, again, we've had learning loss mitigation opportunities for students over the last few years. I would say that as a district, we're committed to every child making at least a year's growth in a year's time, and we're monitoring that. So for any child who would not be progressing during this time, we would implement our multi-tiered systems of support, which you'll see Thursday night, Wednesday night is the basis of our MTS or of our local control accountability plan and how we do business. So I would like to think we'll respond to children who have disrupted learning or any type of learning need, irrespective of the construction setting in which they are learning.
Excellent. Shout out to LCAP. Has perceived cost for fixing environmental mitigation in addition to the known cost for earthquake retrofitting been taken into consideration? Is Measure G paying for it?
Yes, we've accounted for mitigation costs. I believe the last test around 7.5 million. We're hoping we don't have to spend all of it, but if we do, we will use it for that. And then we have to comply with current codes when it comes to seismic requirements. So whether it is a modernization or a new building, it will need to comply with current code and in order to be approved by the state.
What if the cost goes above what we have? Question mark.
I was going to just add one other thing to that thought too, which now is completely gone out of my head. Mitigation costs. Well, you can answer that part and I'll go back to because there was something about cost.
You're asking specifically about mitigation costs going over? If we need to spend more money on it, we will put our heads together and find where that money needs to come from. And part of the costing process we do throughout the design phases, essentially once or twice during a design phase, we check cost based on the evolution of the level of detail of the design. And that allows us to make adjustments as we need, right? And I'm sure you've heard the word value engineering. Essentially, where can we cut or where can we reallocate money to compensate for something else? But it's really it's not a one-time, at the end, here's the design, here's how much it costs. Oops, we need to fix. We don't have enough money. It's really throughout the process. We monitor it.
And I was just gonna add just for 1 second, part of the lease back process that we wanted as a district, why we thought it was important, it gives us an opportunity to have the architects, the general contractor in early in the process. So we have multiple people looking at it, estimating wise, so we have more where there's more analysis of going down throughout the process versus just building out the plans and then we bring in the company. That's one of the benefits of lease back is where you're trying to minimize errors on the front end.
The other thing that I was thinking, I think there was another part of the question, which was how are these funds part of Measure G? So mitigation funds, and I would say that I'm sure in the language of Measure G, it anticipated any sort of mitigation we needed to do, any sort of retrofitting or bringing current standards. That's part of the reason why we're doing a rebuild instead of a modernization, is because the amount of cost involved with just the initial modernization exceeds what we believe we could get as a return on investment.
And that was great because that just answered Anonymous 514. Isn't it less expensive to have a brand new site than trying to retrofit this campus? So thank you for that answer. Okay, we are now at, okay, I'm going to bundle these again because it's another question about Edna. And it's two questions about Edna. Why was it dismissed, either as an option for portables or the permanent building? And that goes with both 526 person and 517 person.
I think we basically answered that. We presented all of the options to the Board of Trustees. The disruption to the Edna community, the disruption to the elementaries who would receive the Edna students, and then the potential costs that Dr. Kaufman mentioned of having to retrofit the existing elementaries to receive those students, and then retrofit Edna to become a middle school, all contributed not only to the timeline, because the elementaries would have to be upgraded before the middle school could take over the Edna site, and then also impacts to the cost for that escalation over time.
And the overall commitment to maintaining the 6th through 8th grade middle school experience was a big driver on that. Again, we're prioritizing our students' learning over facilities. So that was a major reason why we decided to try to keep all kids together.
And thank you for providing that background, because I know some of the people are coming to this, maybe this is their first meeting. So we appreciate that and being willing to reiterate that again. Is the city of Mill Valley responsible for any of the waste spilling into the waterway as the prior owner?
No, the district is in charge of the creek, and so we're the ones who are obligated to maintain it as well as maintenance that comes along with it.
Excellent. Having environmental hazards findings that are able to be mitigated is one thing, but how can you mitigate those hazards while feet away from children?
Again, that's going to be part of the mitigation measures that are going to be outlined in the environmental report and the CEQA report. So more to come once we know exactly what is there or confirm what is there. Again, this could be a variety of measures. I think that'll definitely be something we need to talk with our contractor next time.
And I don't think there's a world where we build anything if it's not mitigated. I mean, I think that's the, I think part of the challenge listening from the community is, yes, you're telling us all about mitigation, but what if you can't mitigate? And we continue to say, we're not going to do anything if we can't mitigate, but it doesn't, until we know it's mitigatable, it's hard to have confidence in that conversation. So I think for us, it, behooves us to get what needs to be mitigated in front of people, and then to talk about what can and can't be mitigated. Again, what we know about this campus, this area, the prior building and the current building is that everything is mitigatable based on what we know and understand. If there's we don't anticipate anything else coming forward. I think that was the premise upon which A, the measure was considered and passed, and B, the work that we've been doing to date. I think there would be many different conversations if we didn't believe things were mitigatable and there weren't an array of data points available to us, letting us know that they are mitigatable or very likely mitigatable.
But why is it going to be mitigated with children right next door? That's, I think, the question that I've heard numerous times is, yes, it can be mitigated. Yes, it's going to cost money to mitigate. Sure. And you could build a beautiful school, but why are we putting temporary housing right next door while it's being mitigated? I think that's the question that I haven't heard the answer yet. And I would like to have more feedback on that.
So the mitigation plan will also include the how, right? So it isn't just, hey, go out and do this cap, let's say. It's going to say, and while you're doing the cap, the construction has to look like this because we've got not only students right next to it, but people who live in this community. And so when we talk about a mitigation plan, there's a mitigation plan, there's a how-to plan, and then there's a monitoring plan that typically comes with that to ensure that the people who are putting in place the mitigation are monitoring their progress on it through testing and everything else to say, we told you in doing this mitigation, you could not do it between the hours of 7 and 3, or you had to put a cap on this before you even dug below it. Whatever it is, those things come out as part of the mitigation plan because DTSC will also include that component in their oversight with inspectors on site. So while we can't tell you exactly what that looks like now, we can tell you that DTSC's process includes oversight of the mitigation plan and its implementation.
Yeah, I mean, I think long story short, we cannot build if it's not safe for kids, right? We're not going to build and have children on an active construction site where there are particulates that are unsafe. Like that's not even within the scope. Our contractor can't do it. There are all these weird safety ratings that they come in with, like a 635 and a 780, and I don't know exactly what they are, but like there's a reality to the fact that we can't expose children. They can't expose their employees. There is no world where we can have children at risk during a construction time. It might mean a longer spring break. It might mean consolidation of calendars. It might mean a later start to the school year. Like, we don't know any of that. It might mean, I don't even know what it might mean, but I think those are the pieces that once we get this report, we need to consider. It might mean only things getting done on non-student time, which then, affects the cost, which then affects the scope of the program. There could be a domino effect. I just have to sort of rely, I've read all the reports, not that I'm trained in any of this, but I've read them. I've read what happened at the community center. I'm fairly confident personally, again, and with an array of experts, including the experts that the city themselves that hired to address their sea level is the same company that Sandrine works for. So I'm confident that when we're being told we can mitigate safely, we can. I can tell you right now as superintendent, if there's something that I have a concern about, I think these people can tell you as well. I'm a little bit of a pain in the neck about things. So we won't do it. We'll sit at the table and say, what are we going to do differently? Again, we have to wait for those CEQA reports to tell us what the nature of those concerns are. Certainly, we're not going to mitigate sea level rise without a community effort. I can tell you that right now. That is not my job as a superintendent, to make sure that the sea level doesn't flood my school district. And I've certainly worked, yes, to build a campus where there's ingress and egress, but I can't make sure that Sycamore or Camino Alto don't flood. That's outside. I don't even own that property. So, that is going to be a community effort. And if we've learned nothing here about working together as a community to support the facilities that we love, care, and want available, I'm sure streets are among just as important as the fields that we have our children play on. So hopefully we'll all work together to make it possible for children to come to school. That said, I want to make sure we will make it safe for kids to be at school during construction. And if there are questions, we'll get creative. I don't know what those are yet. I did reach out to Novato because they have an online school, and I know none of us ever want to go there again. But some families may choose to say, look, we don't want to be on campus during active construction. That may be an option. Again, I don't know what to consider yet. I'm going through my mental Rolodex trying to figure out what's possible, but absolutely, I don't think any of us would. I mean, I just hear the Flint people's voices in my head where they're saying, we can't do this to our own employees. Like, there's no way in the world we're going to do it to kids. And I've been through enough construction projects, not on a site like this necessarily, but to know that the mitigation is real and the monitoring is real as well. So I don't know if it is reassuring, but as long as I'm here, I will do my best to make sure that everybody else does their best.
Okay, get ready. We have some more historical knowledge questions. Is there a time you want to cut this?
I just want to let people know. Sorry, I know we went till 5:30 and I have no idea what staff over here has planned after 5:30 today. So I haven't checked, or anyone here. I do want to let people in the audience know, if you had a 5:30 need to go, please don't feel like you need to stay. We won't be disrespected. But again, the question is for you all, can we 15 minutes? I mean, I think we need to call it at some point, but yes, I know what I have to do in 15 minutes, but
All right,
15.
we're going to call it at 6:00 p.m. And thank you to everyone, especially the panel, for being really willing to just engage all of these questions. And these next ones, again, I'm going to group because it goes back to all of the options that were considered. And there were so many, but I'm going to ask these questions out of respect for the posers of the question. Number one was Edna. Edna, factors seem far less serious than the issues with the current plan. Could we please have the board relook at this balancing? So that's Edna. And then, has the seminary property in Strawberry been approached as a potential placement for a temporary campus during construction? And going back to Edna, sorry, I should have put this back with Edna. No cost feasibility of the Edna option versus the other options were presented. Info presented was qualitative. Please share the numbers. Terra Marin as the new temporary housing area, question mark. So there's a lot of different names and schools in there, but there's this history of what was presented in previous meetings that factors into all of those together.
And revisit, but secondly, I think the revisited, no. So to kind of hit, I'll frame for you all, like, I'm Vanna White. No, that's wrong. That's the wrong TV show. But so can we revisit Edna? Edna's been revisited several times just in the first 4 months of this process. So I would say the board has made its decision on Edna, but then the question becomes, what's the cost feasibility? I know specific numbers have been shared. I believe we did share some initial cost estimates, but so that's question one. Does someone want to grab on Edna and the costs, or no? Okay, that's okay. So we don't remember, but I believe, I mean, it was longer term and more, as I recall, more whatever we had to, what's the word when you prepare it for the other kids at the other sites? Not
We
remodel.
had a plan for the students from Edna coming over, in particular Tam Valley and Strawberry were the sites that had additional space. So we had to build out those sites to be able to plan for Edna students to come over.
And then we needed to remodel Edna on top of already having remodeled Edna. So there would have been a duplicative use of bond funds, which I don't believe is in the community's best interest or our board's best fiscal stewardship. So that's Edna. The seminary, yes, we did visit the seminary on several occasions. Again, the cost of using the seminary as temporary housing were estimated potentially twice to 3 times what we are using for the $15 million temporary housing here. Tamarind has a lease that is very, very tightly written to their benefit. They have been given a 24-month notice, and we do have an item coming up on Wednesday night to look at interim feasibility for and long-term feasibility for the district office location. Again, Marin is secured by the lessor right now. Lessor, lessee, weird. Okay, let's see. You can tell my brain is ready to start focusing on kids and promotions. So they have the site basically for the next 2 years without our ability to access it.
That was great. Thank you. Lineup of many answers. When will the community get a glimpse of the portable classroom and the temporary library design? Did I hear there's already a video, or is that forthcoming?
So we presented a video of the temporary campus in a prior iteration. I don't think it currently represents conceptually what the campus would look like, but it's not the exact current configuration. I think what Dr. Kaufman was alluding to is bringing back a video of the current configuration to be able to share what that looks like. In terms of the portable buildings themselves, the classrooms are fairly fixed and are representative of what's you currently have on site for your portable classroom buildings. The areas of focus are some of the science buildings where we have to identify sinks and other things like that, as well as the library and administration where some customization might be appropriate. I should point out that every dollar we spend customizing leased portable buildings does come out of the overall project budget. So we have been trying very hard to limit it to those key areas that the community and the site have identified as focus areas. The classrooms very much like the ones that are on site already.
Thank you. So this one may be personal, maybe collective. What would it take for each of you to decide that this project is not feasible and to either dramatically reshape the scope or abandon the construction altogether?
I think similar to what Elizabeth and Sandrine talked about is going through the process, seeing the findings of the process to understand kind of what is being requested for the site for mitigation, doing that analysis with our group of experts. And then at that point, if there were to not be a path forward, then we would have to come together to draw up options at that point based off timeline that each one would take, and as well as budget wise to be able to put forward to the board what our options and our roadmap would be at that time in general terms.
Clear understanding of what the mitigation needs are and what the potential risks to children are, and a board conversation to that end.
Excellent, thank you. What do each of the consultants stand to gain financially for this project to commence? And how does this not present a conflict of interest?
Can you repeat the question?
What do each of the consultants stand to gain financially for this project to commence? And how does this not present a conflict of interest?
Go ahead. So we have a contract with each of these individuals that their companies, not these individuals in particular, but they're representing companies that are providing, in essence, goods and services to us that have been approved by both attorneys on both parties. And provide the appropriate exit clauses and oversight clauses that ensure that our district gets the contracted obligations met, or we may terminate. And like everyone else who does a job and gets a salary, these individuals get a salary for the work they do as professionals from their companies.
Thank you.
I don't envy your position or the board's position. This is a really, really complicated project. It's my profession. I'm in development. I do entitlements all the time. Environmental mitigation is complicated. I think your timeline is questionable. I think given where we are to anticipate relocating our kids next May is really optimistic. I came here tonight. I have two daughters that are going to be impacted, a current 5th and 3rd grader, and I have significant concern about the temporary housing. And I do think that the future development that you propose looks incredible, and I think we can get there. But after I'm hearing you tonight, my main concern is this temporary period. I think that we're going to be able to get there on the permanent, but I think the community has raised so many concerns about our kids who are going to be in these temporary units, and I think we've got to address that. You know, no matter what, there's going to be disruption, and there's going to be parties that are unhappy, but so that we can utilize these funds that we have approved, we don't want to lose that and lose the focus on the future. But I think that many of the community members would feel much more comfortable if the temporary housing was addressed in a way that we could, I mean, I can't imagine being able to use the outside when there's construction noise just adjacent. It's just not possible. So I hear you. Many things have been explored. There are no good options, but I think the current path forward, I don't see it happening for the temporary housing, just quite frankly. I'm very concerned. I would be very willing to help be part of the discussion more intimately. But I think that needs to be a focus because there's so many community members now just learning about this. And I think a year ago, there were not many voices at the table and people were unaware, and people are becoming aware. The community is talking about not wanting to send their kids to the middle school. We are going to have a drop in enrollment. It's going to be temporary, but I feel like our focus needs to be on the temporary solution so that we can get to the future. And thank you for the consultants. I think that your responses to all these questions and the way you've answered the questions is very professional and informative. And thank you also to the members here.
Okay, in the next 3 minutes, thank you for that comment. In the next 3 minutes, I'm going to try to find the ones that are very different. And this one is just related to an interesting question about a grade at a different site. Can we put each grade at a different site? 6th grade at Edna, 7th at Strawberry, and so on. The main issue seems to be kids on site during construction.
So again, the initial priority is to keep students 6th through 8th together. We can do any number of things depending on what we find out with the mitigatability. You know, that those may be considerations. It's very disruptive to the quality of program, and at this point, we don't believe that's to the benefit of children. The other piece of that is that when we did our initial analysis of trying to distribute students across the district, we couldn't fit all of them on the campuses where we could actually add portables. So we had like 78 students, maybe it was 48, who still were unhoused in the model of distributing students on campuses. So that didn't solve all of our problems. And again, when we find out what happens with the environmental impact reports and potential mitigation, you know, I think that's why you have those public input periods.
And this is just a comment to the Tara Marin comments earlier. Is the school board aware of the changes with Tara Marin now relocating to San Francisco and being under fiscal distress? They might be happy to get out of their lease. Ask again. So that's just a comment. And then perhaps this is the final about contingency plans. Why haven't real contingency plans been considered given the level of uncertainty apparent in this and every meeting held on this topic?
I would say.
I got you.
Hold on. Why is that green? I would say real contingency plans have been considered and are being considered. I think we don't know the scope yet. And so once we know the scope, it's upon us to respond. We've certainly anticipated nearly every possibility that we could examine, including one that was highly political and risky for our community, and really truly uncomfortable for pretty much everybody who's sitting here, consuming hours and hours and hours and hours for several months. So I do think we've considered real contingency plans. I certainly encourage anybody who wants to advocate for us can advocate other areas in our community too, because we're not the only people that own and manage school facilities or areas where our children might be able to visit and learn.
And thank you to everyone that made it through the 2 hours and beyond.
So if there are concerns about accessing facilities, and there are thoughts that there are other facilities that Mill Valley School District has considered and not been able to access, if there are those in facilities, we've reached out to pretty much every option we can think of, including the fields adjacent to the middle school, and have found that the options that we've considered are either too expensive or untenable. So if there are other areas of influence or concern that we've missed, we're happy to know what those are. But I think we've exhausted every possibility we can think of. And I sure would have loved to build a middle school temporary housing at the seminary, but these people really better minds than mine prevailed because I was all ready to go there, but it costs a lot of money to remodel. And then there will be all sorts of other CEQA issues because of accessing that community. As many of you already know, schools have tried to be placed there unsuccessfully. So I think that was the last and final effort we had. And if I'm missing something, please let me know. But I feel like we have done our due diligence and been back where we started, so please, and I will let us end the meeting, and then if there's anything else.
Thank you so much. And I know a lot of the information, it's hard sometimes to go through previous meeting summaries and things, but I know that's all available on the website as well. Sorry for the misinformation. I know I looked at the old ones and there was a lot back in the day. So apologies for the misinformation. Thank you for the update. Oh, they updated. Okay, just they listen. They certainly do. So, and they listened tonight. Thank you to everyone. And yes, keep coming. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks. That's a wrap. Good to see you.